reminded of the great price that was paid by so many. Our country has a great deal of problems. There's no doubt about that. It is far from perfect. We fight, we have animosity, we have problems going galore around our land. But it is far better than what it could be. A quick conversation with our missionary that is going into closed countries where his people are routinely being gathered up, beaten, raped, thrown in jail, killed, all for having a Bible. Reminds me of just how great a land we have. We need to be careful that we do not get caught up in the consternation of the moment and realize just how good God has been to us. In our journey through the book of Genesis, we've been looking at the life of Jacob since chapter 29. And when Jacob took off to go and get a wife from his mother's homeland, only to be deceived by Laban. If you remember the story, remember the account back in 29. First marrying Leah, that cost him another 7 years in order to acquire Rachel as well. Chapter 30 then saw the growth of the family through some unusual means. And again, I'll tell you, there are times that things in the Scriptures are descriptive, not prescriptive. As I covered last time we were in Genesis, chapter 30 does not give you the prescription of how to have a big family. It gives you a description of how Jacob went about it. You are not to go get a second wife and 2 other handmaids and have all kinds of children. That's descriptive of what happened. Not prescriptive, but it's how it was how God chose through that and allowed allowance for it. But you also see in chapter 30 the provision of God and the cunningness of the skilled herdsman and Jacob in providing great wealth that Jacob had acquired. It is in this accusation of the cattle that would caught the attention of Jacob's enemies, Laban's sons to be exact, and Laban. That is a jumping off point for us in chapter 31. Michael, you want to look at the thermostat to see if it's on cool or on heat. We might need to switch it through the service here. I'm seeing a few people already seem to be a little warm. You guys get too warm, then it's going to be even easier to fall asleep on me. Not that I don't provide plenty of opportunities as it is. All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord, thank you. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for giving us the text that we can base our life upon. Lord, thank you for giving us an example through life of flawed individuals. Jacob was so messed up, Lord. And yet you used him as part of the lineage. Help us to learn from his life, from what you give us here. That we would find something in this chapter that we can apply into our own hearts and our own lives, that we can grow thereby. Lord, I pray for our church family. There are so many that are going through so many different trials right now. There are many here that are battling different financial issues that they are trying to overcome, that you trying desperately to get victory in. Lord, I pray you'd guide and direct them into making the right decisions there. I think of those in our church family that are battling physical ailments and different physical opportunities. I especially pray now for Anna with the test on Friday, that you would guide and direct the doctors, that it would be a clear result, that the cancer will still remain being gone. But I pray you would calm her heart and nerves as she approaches that time. But Lord, I pray mostly for our church family and the spiritual battles going on. Many times we can go and operate in life and we give the impression, Lord, of everything's okay to those around us. But we harbor so many secretive things. Lord, I beg of you to help us to have the victory in your name. that we will lay off those sins that so easily beset us, that we would go after you, the author and finisher of our faith. Lord, give us a passion to be what you've called us to be. Lord, give us a drive to be holy as you are holy. Lord, now I pray for this service that you would guide and direct my thoughts, that I would deliver your word to your people this day, and that your Holy Spirit would have free reign among us, and that we will be obedient in application of what your Spirit brings to our mind. Pray all of this in your precious name. Amen. The journey for Jacob has been an interesting one since running for fear of his life from Esau. If you remember back a little bit, it's been a while since I've been in Genesis, I understand. So if you remember back, Jacob was not an innocent person, was he? Jacob was a schemer of schemers. He had manipulated his brother Esau. He had done all kinds of things wrong. He had helped by the help of his mother Rebekah. They had developed a way to steal the birthright and also the blessing. And he takes off and he has an encounter with God in Genesis 28 and vows a vow, and he goes on and continues on through to where Laban was and where Rebekah was from. But now Jacob in chapter 31 turns his eyes back towards going home, and we see the motivation for this turn. Chapter 31 and verse 1. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's he hath gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers, and unto thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckle shall be your wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And he had said thus, the ringstrake shall be the higher than then bear all the cattle ringstraked. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father, and have given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up my eyes, and I saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ringstraked, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringstraked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. And I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out of this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. Find it interesting that Jacob here lays out in detail the problems and gripes that he has with Laban to his wives, almost like he's trying to convince them to get permission to leave. A weak form of leadership, but still effective here. He lays it out and they agree with him. Yes, that Laban had even turned on them to not provide for them. But the first real reason we see is right away in verse 1, the jealousy of the sons. In verse 1 we see, and he heard the words of Laban's son saying, Jacob had taken away all that was ours. The fathers again gotten all the glory. They were sitting there whining and complaining because Jacob had served and had done and made agreements with Laban and had been prospered. And they looked at at Jacob as somebody that had been stealing from them, when Jacob simply was going forward and doing what he was called to do. The second thing was the attitude of Laban. Was the attitude of Laban there in verse 2, where it expands on it, saying that his countenance was not for him. It's interesting, wasn't it, Laban just a while back that would say, "Oh, don't leave," after Jacob had served the 14 years for Leah and Rachel, And he said, no, don't leave, don't leave. I have found that God has prospered me by your presence. And then he goes ahead and changes his wages, according to this text, 10 different times. And it says, the countenance is not with me. You might think, well, what's the big deal about the countenance is not with me? In other words, he's kind of gotten grumpy. He no longer smiles at me, but he's kind of grumpy. It's a little bit more of a meaning to that. To give you a reference point for that countenance, in Genesis 4:5 we see, and Cain's and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his what? Countenance fell. How did that work out? Did it mean that Cain got kind of grumpy? Or did it mean that Cain got violent? And he actually killed Abel. There was a seriousness to this. And Jacob's looking at Laban and saying, you know what? He has changed his whole disposition towards me. His attitude has changed. It has shifted. And henceforth, there's probably a concern in Jacob's heart and mind for his own well-being. Laban and his sons were both opposed to Jacob, but the real reason, the real impetus for his return journey, we see in verse 3. And that was the direction of God. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Then later, revealing in his wife's dream that he received in Genesis 31:13, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out of this land, and return to the land of the kindred. This journey was never meant to be a one-way trip, was it? He had been sent there to find a wife and then to return. He had that encounter in Genesis 28 and verses 20 and 21. It reads, and Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, I will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then shall the Lord be my God. It was a plan all the way along to come back. So it was a matter of honoring a vow. He had made a commitment that was made, and now God was calling him to return to the land that he had promised to Abraham and to Isaac. Far too many times we make promises to God, we make commitments, and then we fail to keep them. A man vow a vow unto God, he better keep it. You're better off not to vow anything than to vow and to break it with God. We need to be people of our word. Jacob had vowed that he would return, and he had made that promise, and God had provided for him. We see now in the text, we go on to the movement of the land, verse 17. And Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, and the cattle of his getting which he had gotten in Pandaram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and rose up and passed over the river, and set his face toward the mount of Gilead. And it was told to Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. And he took his brethren with him, and pursued after him 7 days' journey. And they overtook him in the mount of Gilead. And God said to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob, and now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me? And didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with myrrh, and with songs, and with tabret, and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters, that thou hast now done foolishly in so doing? It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father spake unto me yesterday, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now though thou wouldest need be gone, because thou sorest longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure, thou wouldst take by force thy daughters from me. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Therefore our brethren discern that thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and went into Leah's tent, and went into the two maidservants' tents, and he found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent, and entered into Rachel's tent. And Rachel had taken the image, and put them in the camel's furniture, and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee. For the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. The mighty patriarch waits for Laban to go about shearing sheep. Jacob waits for Laban to go up shearing sheep in Canaan, and gets a 3-day head start. And there's a deception in his departure that perhaps for most of us would understand. Remember who Laban is. You almost want to say with Laban here, when I was reading through that, the phrase saying, it's a pot calling the kettle black. When he said, how dare you take off on me? How dare you do this? How dare you do that? Laban was this dirty, rotten schemer too. And here he's accusing Jacob of doing something that he probably would have done himself. But yet here he has the audacity. But if you remember, Laban was the one back in when Abraham had sent his servant out to get Rebekah, or to get a wife for Isaac. It was Laban that had delayed the servant and tried to get the servant to stay. And it was Laban when Jacob had said, well, I'm going to depart to my servant. No, stay, because I have found God has prospered me. What do you think would have been the natural reaction that Jacob would have thought that Laban would have done if he would have told him, I'm leaving now? It would have been more manipulation. It would have been more scheming. So I really don't blame Jacob for taking off. Laban takes off in hot pursuit, easily overcoming him due to Jacob traveling with everybody. Jacob's got all of his herds. He got everything with him, camels, all the tents, everything. And here Laban is just his men and him take off to catch them up to them. And in 7 days' journey, they catch them. Can almost imagine the disposition of Laban to this inconvenience. I don't think Laban pulled up on Jacob and say, oh, hi, great to see you again. More like it, you dirty, rotten bum. You caused me an inconvenience. You caused problems. But yet we see God provided a protection. Genesis 31:24, and God came to Laban and Syrian in a dream, and by night and said, take heed not to speak of Jacob either good nor bad. It's a wonderful truth here that there is no place safer than in the center of God's will. Our memory verse for the week, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. When we are walking in the center of God's will, when we are doing what God has called us to do, even though our enemies might not actually be at peace, they can do us no harm that God does not allow. There's a security to that. God is protecting. I'm sure Laban probably would have loved to have chastised Jacob, to really come after him. But yet God intervened. The shameful thing here, though, is with Laban, it seems that he's more upset about his missing idols. He's more concerned about the idolatry. I may have a different sense of humor than some people. Okay. I understand that. I will acknowledge that. But I find comedy in verse 30. Where it says, and now though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou were longest after thy father's house. Okay, now you're going to leave because you want to go home. I understand that. Yeah, wherefore, why he's stolen my gods? I find that funny. If your gods can be stolen, you have a puny God. You have an awful, pathetic, small little God if your gods can be carried off in a camel's furniture and be sat on by Rachel. We see Laban going in the tent looking for his pathetic little trinkets to no avail, because Rachel, his own spawn, knew how to pull the tricks just like her dad probably taught her. But Laban's concern reveals his values as it does universally. We could make light of Laban in his search for gods to be hidden in the furniture of his daughter sitting on him. Yet we need to be careful that we do not have just as pathetic of gods in our own lives. Remember, what is an idol? An idol is a little g God, is anything that you place above the real big G-O-D God. That could be entertainment, social media, video games, sports, hobbies, crafts, jobs, appearances, possessions, and even family. I hope I caught everybody here. We all battle sometimes with different things in our lives that may be good, that we have a tendency to place in the wrong position. And before we get on somebody like Laban for his little trinkets, let's make sure our own hearts is pure and going after God and God alone, and not have our own idols of our heart. How do you know if something that is good is becoming evil and becoming an idol? Jesus gave us an answer. For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. What do you spend your time and your mind thinking about? Where is your heart at? I was told one time, if you can tell what people value by two different things: what they talk about constantly and what they spend their money on. Now that's meddling, I know, and I should have said that before the offering. But if we were to examine your bank account, would it say that God is important to you or not? If we were to examine your conversations that you have with people, does God come up at all in your conversations? Is He a passion? Or do you have so many other things that you bring up so often that are so much more valuable to you, even though you wouldn't say that? Where's your heart? If your heart is not with God, you have just as much of an idol as Laban did. Next we see the malevolence poured out. Verse 36. The hatred, angst. And Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all of thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of the beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it, and of my hand didst thou require of it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day that thou the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father and the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hast sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. It doesn't take much of an imagination to get the feeling of the pure frustration that Jacob has with Laban. You can almost say there's probably a little bit of an anger here. An angst, if you will. But there's an understanding of why he felt this way. The thing is, for Laban and others like him, the manipulators are never satisfied. People that manipulate, 14 years, he states there, that I served for thy daughters, 6 years for thy cattle, and yet you would have sent me away empty. There's never comes a place that a manipulator, those that try to connive things away, will ever say, that's enough. They're always going to want more. When you deal with people that constantly are manipulating you or constantly trying to get something from you, it almost becomes a sport to them to try to milk you for just a little bit more. As mentioned earlier in Jacob's plea to his wives in Genesis 31:7, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. We're not given all 10 of those times. There's no reason to doubt it. Jacob had taken every loss and suffered the cruel treachery of Laban, and yet there still seemed to be a treatment like Laban who wanted more loyalty. There are and will be people in our lives that will always be looking to take advantage of us. That will continually look for ways that they can make you feel indebted to them. They're always going to be sitting there trying to guilt trip you, try to manipulate you, to try to get you to give them more and more and more and more and more. And yet we need to place our faith and hope and confidence in Christ. We need to be honorable. We need to be honest in our dealings with people. We need to be straightforward. We need to give, do benevolence to those that it is owed. But yet we need to also take a stand that Christ is my source and my rock. We need to remember that there's security in divinity. At the end of the diatribe that Jacob had towards Laban, we see in that verse, God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked thee. Jacob says, you know what? I have done everything I've been asked of. I have followed through on my part. Jacob fully understood the nature of Laban and what would have happened if it was not for the intervention of God on his behalf. He'd be leaving with nothing after 20 years of service. And it is the provision of God that Jacob had anything to leave with. And it would do us well to take note of that. God is the one that deserves the praise, the gratitude for provisions in our life. We far too often get quick to that we fail to remember the grace of God in our lives, and if it was not for His grace, we would have nothing. It's the mercy of God that He gives us anything. It's the mercy of God that He doesn't give us more, and the grace of God that He gives us anything. He is the one that gives us the ability to do whatever we do. It's a failure to understand a basic concept when you talk to somebody that says, "Well, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps." No, you didn't. You know the ability you had to pull up those bootstraps came from God? I have the privilege of driving a special needs bus. And some of those kids that get on that bus do not have the basic functioning, intellectual or physical functioning that most have. Do you know it's a grace of God that you do? And for you to be arrogant in what you can and cannot do is forgetting that God gave you those abilities. I figured this out. Who gave you the mental capacity to figure that out? I worked hard. Who gave you that ability to work hard? Yes, we are to do our best. Yes, we are to go after things. But we also need to remember it is of God that I have the ability to do it. It's all of Him. How dare we take any pride of any gift that He has given me in my life? We see a memorial is established here. Drop down to verse 50. We'll come back to 43. Verse 50. And if thou shalt afflict my daughters, and thou shalt take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, Behold this heap, and behold this pillar which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be a witness, and this pillar be a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread, and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned to his place. We see here at the close of the chapter, the stack of rocks was set up in an agreement of boundaries for each of them. Verse 52 there, the heap of a witness, a pillar. It's that last phrase there that struck me. And neither one of us shall pass this pillar for harm. Like for harm. But it struck me when I got thinking about it more. Jacob and Laban had a lot in common, did they not? They were both schemers. They were both manipulators, and they both had their own ways that they would manipulate and scheme. And if they would pass and see each other again, you can almost guarantee there would have been harm. One would have tried to manipulate the other somehow, some way. And yet there's this mindset that we are going to set this up, and we're going to give an accountability to God to maintain the agreement. I'm not sure if I would trust either one of these men. I don't know about you, but if you look at Laban and you look at Jacob and you really understand the process, how many of you would actually trust them to take care of your finances for you? And trust that you're actually going to have anything left. I could trust them with mine because there's nothing to start with, so nothing afterwards, Might get more debt at the end, but maybe that. But the fact of the matter is these men had proven untrustworthy, but yet they would sit there and say the accountability to God. That's the only accountability we can ever trust on. The stack of these rocks would serve as a reminder. Back up to verse 43. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters or unto my children, which they have borne? Now therefore come, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let us be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar Shahudutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore the name of it is called Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when thou art absent one from another. Notice there in verse 48, and Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee. Aren't you glad that it won out for Jacob's Gilead? The other one was a little bit hard, or harder. This type of memorial is established as a reminder of the agreement of a testimony of promise. A testimony of promise. Many memorials are designed to remind you of what has happened or the sacrifice that others have endured for your benefit. This weekend being Memorial Day weekend, our country is designed to remind us of the great price that was paid for our freedom. There are many people that paid with their whole being. As a Christian, I'm very appreciative to those that gave that last full measure of devotion for my political freedom. I appreciate it. I thank the Lord for it. I am, though, more grateful for the one that paid for my spiritual freedom. The laying down of his life for my freedom. This memorial was to cause, in Genesis 31, was to cause the people to think, to meditate, to process what had happened here. It is that memorial that we observe the elements of the communion that are before, the elements that are before me. What is the purpose of doing communion? Well, it's a ritual, right? We do it. No. It's not just something we do because we're a church and we believe in taking communion, and so we're just going to do it to do it. That's what you do as a church. No, it is a memorial. It is the phrase that is used in the text of Scripture in Corinthians. And when he had given thanks, he brake it and said, take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. This do in what? Remembrance of me. After the same manner also he took the cup, and when he had supped, saying, this cup is the New Testament of my blood. This do ye as often as you drink it in what? Remembrance of me. Every time we come to the Lord's table, we should take the time to think through exactly the great price that Christ paid for us. It was your sin that he died for on that cross. And he paid that great price for you and for I. If I could have our deacons come, see if they know who they are. If our deacons could come, Josh and Joe and Pastor Ryan. I know this doesn't need to be said for Joe, but remember, guys, you don't have a microphone, so you might have to speak up. We're going to take the time to look at this memorial. And I would challenge you this weekend to think back and remember the memorial of all those that paid such a great price in our country. But don't fail to remember the great price that our Savior paid. I'll ask Josh if you'll lead in the prayer for the thanks for the bread.